Ida Von Smith, Black Aviator, born 1917, died 2003. Ida Von Smith was an African American pilot and flight instructor, born in 1917 in Lumberton, North Carolina, and died in that very town on May 13th, 2003. Smith was the youngest of three children and grew up in a loving and sheltered environment. Her mother was African American and her father was of mixed ethnicity. Her family was very religious and attended church services on a regular basis. Smith's interest in aviation began when she was a child. She took an interest in barnstorming and wing walking exhibitions in Lumberton. She married Edith D. She married Edward D. Smith and moved to New York City. She and her husband raised four children. Ida Von Smith's second husband was Benjamin E. Dunn. Smith graduated from Redstone Academy in 1934 as the valedictorian of her class. She studied at Barber Scotia Junior College in Concord, North Carolina, and then attended Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. She graduated with a major in social studies and a minor in mathematics. Smith earned a scholarship at the City College of New York, where she earned a Master of Science degree in 1964. In 1967, Smith went to the LaGuardia Airport to take her first lesson in a single-engine airplane. She then studied at the airport in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Smith became a licensed pilot, instrument rated, which means that she was allowed to fly during inclement weather and ground instructor. Inclement weather and ground instructor. After receiving her Master's of Science from the City College of New York, Smith worked as a teacher for 2 years in North Carolina. After marrying Edward D. Smith, Ida continued to teach in Queens, New York. She taught in New York City public schools for many years before enrolling in her first flying lesson at the age of 50. After becoming a licensed pilot in 1967, Smith found the Ida Von Smith flight clubs to introduce children to careers in aviation and aerospace. Adults were allowed into the program by special request. She taught her students using a stationary airplane instrument panel in her living room. Her program was then expanded into public schools and started an introductory aviation course for adults at York College. Volunteers from varying areas of aviation gave her classes tours of airplanes and airports. They also took her students flying and gave lectures and demonstrations appropriate for each age group. Children in the program, along with their parents, flew in small airplanes, seaplanes, and helicopters. They visited aerospace museums and the Federal Aviation Administration installations. Students in the program learned the controls, functions of the instruments, and what makes a plane fly by sitting in Smith's own Cessna 172 cockpit. Students also got to meet airplane pilots, flight attendants, air traffic controllers, meteorologists, aircraft mechanics, and others whose jobs pertain to the aviation industry. At first, she used personal funds to establish her flight clubs. Now she receives funding from corporate and private donations and volunteer efforts. Ida Von Smith headed 11 flight clubs located in New York, Texas, and St. Lucia, but there would eventually but there will eventually be more than 20 clubs across the U.S. Photographs and storylines of Smiths appear in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, with the Tuskegee Airmen's Black Wings in the Pentagon, and in the International Women's Air and Space Museum in Cleveland, Ohio. In 1978 to 79, the FAA funded Smith's aviation career programs for three high schools in New York and New Jersey. Later on, these programs were adopted by the FAA. Smith designed an aviation-oriented coloring book for children. She produced and hosted a cable television show on aviation. She also produced and published 5 booklets on the history of her flight clubs. She spoke about aviation at schools, churches, and museums. Ida Von Smith was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen's Black Wings, Negro Airmen International, and the 99s. Citations are in the description.